A long time ago, Western art was obsessed with making art about things you could see, people or places or things that you could look out into the world and actually see them and trying to represent them as closely to how they actually looked as possible. Music, however, had abstraction, sounds that didn't actually mean things. And it was a very long time until art started to create work that was sounds without meaning, or shapes and colors in this case, with no actual recognizable meaning. The first person in Western art credited with making this kind of work was a Russian guy named Wasily Kandinsky, and he would create artwork that was actually inspired by music called improvisations and compositions. And they were collections of lines and shapes and colors and movement through the work that was supposed to give you a feeling that transcended the need to be actual things. This led to a huge movement in art called non-objective or non-representational art. You've got these giant paintings by Franz Klein that are just black shapes and lines breaking up the surface of the canvas. You've got painters like Jackson Pollock just splattering layers and layers of paint onto a huge, enormous canvas, creating texture and color automatically. You've got painters creating controlled images of shapes and colors, all the way down to the color field abstractionists who were so bold as to just paint a canvas a single color. But not all artists took their inspiration from thin air. Some artists started with things like this tree by one artist you actually know very well, and he's slowly abstracting it. And it is representational, but the abstraction continues further and further, simplifying things down to their base unmixed colors and bold, simple lines and shapes. And you can see how slowly these transformations of this tree become something totally different, totally unrecognizable. And this is the artist Piet Mondrian that everybody has seen his work. He does continue working past this point and creates some interesting works, but still along the same vein, all of them created originally based off this one idea of a tree. And he wasn't the only one. Like California artist Richard Diebenkorn drew these streets and big lots and eventually turned them into real simple, clean shapes. And non-objective art or even abstraction is part of contemporary art today. These artists work with just shape and color for its own sake, art for art's sake. No pure representation needed, such as these paintings by Liz Moggins, here a Cleveland-based artist. So now that we've talked a little bit about abstraction or non-objective art, we're going to do something to prep our canvas so we can get started for next time. When you're done prepping your canvas, you're going to need to leave it somewhere to dry. It might take a little longer to dry than normal since we're going to get it wet. Make sure you take a picture of it though and submit it. You don't need to wait for it to dry to do that. So here we go. While we're painting this thing today, we need to think about our color wheel, and we want to keep our neighbor colors mixing. So that means red can mix with yellow, red can mix with blue, preferably the cool red with the blue and the warm red with the yellow, but red cannot mix with green without making mud. So I want to make sure when I'm mixing, I'm using those other colors in between to transition, like from cool red through blue to green, not just straight red to green. That's important, and I want you guys to be thinking about it while you work. Here I've got my canvas, and I'm watering down paint, starting with yellow and two different kinds of yellow, and I'm just laying it in with a lot of water, creating washes of color. I'm not getting too hung up if some of my brush strokes show, because a lot of this is going to get covered up as we move forward with this project. This is just going to be my starting base layer, and I'm not going to get too worried if it's not exactly correct. So water it down, wash the whole thing, get every inch of that canvas colored. covered. At the end, I splashed some little bits of color just to add a little variety on top here, and then I'm going to set this whole thing off to dry. This whole thing only took me 7 minutes, so don't take too long to work on this project. Hopefully you're done and your canvas is completely covered, sitting off to dry somewhere, soaking in all that great color. That rainbow splotches is going to be the base for our abstract piece. Now I'm going to create some simple shapes on this small piece of paper. You could use a corner of your book, or you can just kind of start from scratch if you want. I am going to try and create several 3D spheres with highlights and shadow on them. So first thing I'm going to do is create my base color. So I'm going to create my first sphere. I'm going to make it kind of pink. So I'm going to start with a dark pink color and just make a simple circle. If you wanted to, you could trace some circles out here ahead of time. I am not going to. Normally I tell you to not use your wrist. I'm trying to figure out how to get my wrist to help me make a good circle. It's not great, but it's good enough. Then I'm going to take some of my pure dark red and away from the edge a little bit, I'm going to kind of make like a crescent moon shape here while this other paint is wet. And I'm going to kind of blend it in as I get towards the center here, leaving a little bit of halo on that far side. If I overblend it, I'm going to just add a little more red into the dark parts, letting the paint be thick so that the paint underneath will just automatically mix with what I'm putting on top. Some of you guys, you're really into painting like thin layers like you're painting with watercolor, but I want to make sure that I'm letting this acrylic paint get thick and work how it's designed to work. Wipe some of this off, go back to this pink, kind of push back in here, blend it in. So you can definitely see starting to be the shadow on this side. Okay? I know it's hard to see with the glare. I got glare on here, but that's where I'm at. So then I'm going to add a little more white to it. Get an even lighter paint a circle of that here. You guys see how that's just a circle? And I'm going to blend that out from the circle. Once I get that pretty blended, I'll come in and punch that up even more. Blend it out a little more. And then at the end here, I'm going to clean my brush really well, dry it off, and I'm going to mix almost a white color. And this time I'm not going to blend it. I'm just going to pop it on there. And I'm going to pop a little one next to it. Got a little blended while I did it, so I'm going to do it again. Again, the thicker the paint, the more influence it'll have if they blend. So I didn't like the way that turned out. I wished it was a little cleaner. So I'm going to get a round brush, kind of blend around it. I'm actually going to blend that second one out, so I'll only have one. Okay, so now I've got this simple shape that's blended pretty good. Okay, I kind of was hoping that would have turned out a little better than it did. Um, I got a little bit of better lighting here, so I'm going to do a different one. And I'm adding just a little bit of that medium light down this side as a reflected light. And I put it on there wet after the painting was dry, and I'm going to kind of dry my brush now. And before it has a chance to totally dry, I'm going to use my slightly damp brush to soften out the edge of this paint. You see that? Okay, so let's try a different one. So let's try a blue one now, and I'll put it nearby. So I'm going to start with this blue color, but I'm going to mix white to it because I want this to not be my darkest form of the color, because I want to be able to use the dark form of the color for the shading. So here I go. I think I should do a green one next. I'm going to try and create, see all that tearing on the side? I either need more paint or to add a little water. So I added a little water, but not a lot of water. I don't want it to be watercolor, just staining the paper. I want the paint to be thick enough that I can mix it with the next layer of paint. It should still have a physical quality, but be viscous enough, flow enough to make a smooth border. So then I'm going to go take some of that pure dark blue, put that on there, get a little bit of that extra paint off my brush, and blend that. I have to get some of that lighter color because when I water it down, it dries faster because water evaporates faster than paint. So I had to go back and get some more paint because the middle color that I used was already dry by the time I put this on. Okay, and then on the far side, I can kind of soften some of that edge where it's super, just like there was like a clump of dark paint. And then I'll push some of this darkness even a little further. And I could even push it a little further. It looks a little stronger in life than it does on the camera. So I don't want to overdo it, just so it looks good for you on the camera. But I don't want to underdo it either. I'm kind of pushing and pulling, letting the paint stay wet, working quickly so I could get that nice smooth transition there. You can't get that without the paint being wet, so that's important. So then I'm going to add a little more white to my blue, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make that circle, and that's probably enough. I'm going to clean my brush off, fade that into the color that should be there. If I'm getting, you see how I'm getting all this dry texture? You probably can't with this camera, but if I am, I can go back with some of that middle color so I have something to mix to. Okay, and I'm going to do it a little more. Same color. Put a little bit more of that medium, the middle color on so the two colors can mix. Since I'm only using this blue and the white, it's easy enough to kind of like push and pull the color by just adding more blue or adding more white. I don't have a complex mix here, so it's making my life pretty easy. Then at the end, I'm going to try and do this a little more decisively this time. Just going to pop a little pure white right there. Just a little highlight. Maybe I'll soften it and then hit it one more time. Okay? And that one's done. I'm going to try and do one more. So far, this has only been 5 minutes, so this time I'm going to do a green. So I'm going to mix my green, add my white to it. Make it a little bigger this time. I have paint up here from mixing, so I'll kind of get that off the brush and then scoop it back up and move it around with the bristles, the hair of the brush. Okay, now I'm going to mix the darker green back. Now because I added white to this and it's a mix, I can't just add the green because there is no green. So I'm going to actually mix this color from scratch and mix it in here. I kept the paint nice and thick, so I do have something to work with here. I also mixed a decent sized batch, so I'm going to go grab some of that, help get the transition right. Pump it up one more time. This will be my last, except for the white highlight. So I put the paint on there, nice and thick, and then I kind of got some of the paint off my brush. And this, now I'm going to wash my brush because I've got too much of that paint on there, that light paint. And I just want to blend what's already put down. I don't want to like shift it too much back to the white. Okay, smooth that transition out, pop my light. Now I'm going to pop my light up here because I kind of turned this one. So, unfortunately with these paintings, there's a sheen on them, so it's hard to see until they dry how they really look, and this camera is not the best camera in the world. So, I got my 3 circles. You guys make 3 circles, smooth them down, maybe even try and get some sort of, if you want to do more than 3, do more than 3 if you have time. This might take you longer than it took me just because of experience levels. Here we go. So the yellow, it's hard to get clean yellow. My brush has even a little bit of paint in it, but that's okay. I'll let it be a slightly lemony yellow. A little bit on the greener side. But then I'm going to take a little bit for my shadow, because how do you shade this? Because I started with the base color, so I'm going to take a little bit of that red orange, and I'm going to take a little bit of blue, but be really careful with the blue. Remember, that blue can make a lot of change. So I'm going to kind of make a darker, more neutralized yellow color. Paint that on. So I kind of mixed like a brownish orange yellow to do this. And you'll notice the yellow is so translucent that all those imperfections don't really get covered up that well with the yellow. So that's something I gotta like watch for when using yellow. I can't just paint yellow over something. Look, it's not even influencing it very much. Anyone remember what animal I said yellow was? A mouse. So then I'm going to add a little white to the yellow. I might have added a lot of white to the yellow. Let's see. This color will actually cover, and if I overdo this color, I can go in with more pure yellow on top. Sometimes when working with yellow, you have to paint it white and then paint it yellow if you're trying to change it from something else to yellow. Painted over my whole shadow a little there. I will come back with that shadow color. I just was trying to get rid of some of that dirt. And I might just pop my white. Be done. I'm not going to overfuss that white. I think a little bit of shape and then it's done. You know what? I'm actually going to try and darken that shadow even more. And since I don't have any black out on my palette right now, I've got to try and make a dark brownish yellow. Okay? So I got 4 circles. Hopefully you can have stained your whole canvas, listen to me talk about abstract or non-objective art, and gotten 3 circles done today. Should be plenty of time. Go paint.